Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Nathan Moore. I'm at the Geography Department at MSU, and I am standing in for Jeff Andreessen this week. The big news weather-wise recently is that we had a relatively large rainfall event that moved through with as much as 6 inches in some places in Michigan. This is a radar image from just a few days ago showing the extent and the intensity of that cold front that brought us this very pleasant air mass that we're currently under now. We've gone from very high temperatures in the 90s to unseasonably cool weather for these next several days, pretty much the remainder of the weekend and also into the next week. So there has been some significant straight line wind damage. I saw some good photos of damage on several websites. It's really nothing compared to what they've been seeing, though, in South Dakota and Iowa, though. It's been really intense rainfall for a very long time. Soil moisture levels are extremely high. And I'm hearing a lot of farmers talk about how it reminds them of the big flood of 1993. It's not really in the news to the same level. So we're kind of complaining about very small things when there's much bigger issues around. So what we've seen over the last week is warmer temperatures, well above normal, 4, 5, even 6 degrees above average. And you can see in this figure that there's a sort of a southwest to northeast sort of dividing line between the warmer temperatures towards the southeast and the cooler temperatures in Wisconsin and the UP and in Minnesota. And that's a sort of a theme that we'll see throughout today as I go through and show you some data. So temperatures were warmer. We're going to shift to a little bit of a colder state for the next week. The previous week's rainfall, we're seeing a lot of accumulated precipitation, particularly over in southern Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, and southern Minnesota, northern Iowa. And that general pattern is also evident in the looking at data for the previous month. So again, you can start to see this sort of dividing line in both of these images about where we're seeing the storm tracks are sort of lining up right through the middle of the lower peninsula in Michigan. If we look at the accumulated precipitation from just the last week of storms, from the 18th to the 24th, you can see the bullseye in northwestern Iowa, and that led to some of the flooding that we've seen in that area. And you can see that we've had higher than normal rainfall amounts in the UP and the northern lower. Whereas in southern Michigan, it's starting to look it's starting to look like there's less rainfall that accumulated in that part of the state. And what has that led to in terms of soil moisture? Well, you can pretty much expect that you're going to get very, very full soil profiles. Soils are completely saturated in the areas that are in blue, and they're very, very waterlogged in the areas in green. I saw one news report that said in Iowa, it normally would take about maybe 2 or 3 weeks to plant their whole region in northwestern Iowa. It's taken more than 2 months because you just can't get the equipment into the field. So this is really an exceptional rainfall event to the west. And you also see this in the UP, in the eastern half of the UP, and in parts of the northern lower. So there's a real strong wet factor that's been creeping in. And if you're in the southern half of the state, you may not have noticed it, but it's going to have a big impact on timing of things. You can kind of zoom in a little bit here, and you can see that our conditions are a little bit dry in spotty areas in the southern part of Michigan, but we're by and large it's mostly in the gray zone. We're doing okay. Soils are drying out more quickly in the south part of the state, and it's even more dramatic as you go further south. Places like Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio are seeing much drier soils, and they're also seeing warmer soils. So you can see that gradient again passing through Michigan, where you're seeing warmer soils in the south and cooling as you get towards the north. And the rainfall pattern that I showed you earlier is you can kind of superimpose that in your mind, and you can see that this is largely driving a lot of the rainfall patterns. So if we look at the growing degree days, that you see on your seed bags, you can see that the growing degree days that we have had since the beginning of May, that's the map on the left, and the departure from normal is over here in the right image. And so here we're seeing that that we're quite a bit ahead in parts of southeastern Michigan and southwestern Michigan. As you move further north, of course, the growing degree days declines, and we're not so far ahead in those parts. In fact, it looks like the purple here in the part of the western UP is a little tiny bit behind, but the rest of the state clearly shows that line ahead. And there's that dividing line again that's been really pronounced with the rainfall this year. If we can zoom into Michigan, we can look at the cumulative growing degree days, and you can see that clearly we're at least a week ahead, if not more, in certain areas. And that enhanced growing degree days is really pronounced almost directly following the forest tension zone. Everything south of that zone is in the darker reds, where you're really seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 days ahead of the normal schedule. And a lot of that acceleration was due to that really warm 90-degree weather for several days that we saw last week. What we're looking at coming here into the next few days is we can see that there's a very strong dome of high pressure and control, nice big Canadian air mass. And we can see that there's some rainfall that is coming off the Front Range of the Rockies, and that's going to slide here as part of a warm front. And then there's a cold front out there to the west that will be following hot on its heels. So it looks like this storm system is going to come in late Friday night, early Saturday. It'll be moving pretty quickly. What you can see from the infrared imagery here is you can see that there's really dry air in the upper Midwest in control. You can see here's that storm system forming up over the Rockies as it all starts to slide across. This is a lot more disorganized, and it won't be 5 and 6 inches of rain. I think it's going to be more like maybe 1 or 2 inches of rain when it gets here. It should be moving pretty quickly. So if we look into how things are going to slice up, we can see there's that wave here that we're expecting to see on Friday and Saturday, and we can see that there are actually several waves out here over the Eastern Pacific and the Western Pacific, and some strong rainfall generating events that are going to be coming here over the next 10 to 12 to 14 days. So it looks like at least the early start of July, it's going to have some nice rainfall events. And you can look at this is a polar view. So here's the US here, and there's Greenland, and there's Alaska. So you can see those wave trains coming over here. There's that disturbance off of Washington State, and here's the rainfall generator to the south of the Aleutian Islands. So you can see that we're going to get, bing, 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 bing. There's plenty of rain generating events out there, at least for a couple of weeks. Looking at the forecast model, this is what the forecast model was predicting for last week, a pretty intense rainfall event. It looks like the model did really well because we actually saw rainfall, as you saw in the rainfall maps that I showed earlier. It looks pretty close to that with that strong southwest northeast dividing line. Going forward into looking at this week's precipitation totals starting basically today, there's not a lot of rainfall expected here in Michigan based on the model. That's going to be more fueled by by the recycled evaporation from the surface in already the waterlogged soils of Iowa. So Maybe some cloudiness, but maybe not too much rain. And it looks like the model is predicting rain a lot on the western half of the lower peninsula, and then some more in the western part of the UP going forward. But again, smaller amounts, not the 5 and 6 inches we saw previously. And you can see the wave trains coming through the fronts, and there's a series of warm front, cold front, warm front, cold front that are going to be sliding right on through. And so what that's also going to mean is with these cooler air masses coming in, you're seeing a lot lower evapotranspiration pressure. So the potential ET, we're seeing numbers, only around 1.2, maybe 1.3 in a couple places. So a lot lower evaporative pressures than we saw last week. And that'll be the case for at least 5 or 6 days until we start to see a significant warm up in the later part of the month. Looking ahead into most of July, the monthly temperature outlook just came out last Thursday. For Michigan, it looks like we have a very high likelihood of being above normal for the month of July in temperature. And looks like in terms of precipitation, we're going to be shifting below average for at least the southern half of the state. Now, the UP is looking like it has a 50-50 shot at keeping its same amount of moisture levels. I looked at the European model. It tends to do a little bit better with certain atmospheric variables. The European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting model is predicting afternoon cloud cover on the 4th of July, but no rain and seasonally normal temps. So I think it's going to be a great day for a cookout. So my summary here basically is that we're going to have some unseasonably cool weather for this weekend, a little bit of rain on Friday night into Saturday morning. Again, some weather on another front that will come here probably maybe Tuesday. And then we're seeing weakening of the upper air troughing and the cold air advection pattern with these moderating temperatures that'll run probably well into Thursday, Friday of next week. And then we'll start to see a big July warm up. Now, typically July is warmer and drier. We shift into sort of the dry part of the summer. And I think that trend will be very pronounced after the next couple of weeks. So I'm trying to give you a 2-week forecast, take a little bit so you can see, look a little bit around the corner at what to expect. Heat will pick up after a couple of weeks, and I think we'll have a great 4th of July, though. Thanks.